I think this just might be my masterpiece.
Are Quentin Tarantino's films overrated? Short answer, yes. Often, vastly.
Go home to your mother!
But Tarantino is not a bad director. Far from it. He is sometimes infuriatingly quite brilliant, which makes this a much more complex question. So let's dive in.
You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
Tarantino burst onto my cinema screen in 1990. Burst. This was such a beautifully typed film, filled with amazing acting, great dialogue,
Yeah, that's easy for you to say. You're Mr. White. You have a cool sounding name.
and fantastic music. It was, and still remains today, a masterpiece. And as if that wasn't enough, his next film was even bigger, even brasher, even better.
Come on, let's get into character.
Pulp Fiction stunned us once again 2 years later in 1994. Startlingly original storytelling, constantly surprising dialogue, wonderful acting. It made you laugh, but it kept you constantly on your toes.
I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
Apart from the rather cringy Bruce Willis love relationship,
Potbellies are sexy.
once again we had another masterpiece.
So, pretty please, with sugar on top. Clean the fucking car.
Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction highlight three undeniable skills Tarantino brings to the craft of making movies. Great dialogue writing, surprising yet brilliant casting and performances, and a superlative use of music. His mixture of the everyday with the consequential revolutionised the way characters could talk in films.
Royale with you.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
His dialogue was, and still remains, funny and surprising, lulling you into a sense of security before fizzing off into the unexpected. It was artificial, but it felt real. The acting in these films is superb as well, but more importantly perhaps is the casting. Genius casting. Steve Buscemi, Tim Roth and Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs, Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Chef's kiss. None of these were anything like as famous as they became after appearing in Tarantino's films. He used actors the mainstream didn't know or had ignored, and he used them brilliantly. And of course there was the music. Not the obvious hits and classics, not composed film scores. Tarantino, as with his casting, found gems in the rough. Everyone, and I mean everyone I knew, had a copy of the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack. We loved the songs, even though we hardly knew any of the bands. The problems, unfortunately, began with his third film, Jackie Brown. I mean, this was an unenviable situation for any filmmaker. Two instant, highly successful classics already under his belt. Everyone was waiting for Tarantino's next move. The world expected. Jackie Brown, after all the hype of his first two masterpieces, was a relative disappointment, and I think it changed everything about the way Tarantino made his art, for the worse. The film is actually rather good. Again, great casting and acting, great dialogue and great music.
I gave my heart and soul to you, girl.
Example, Tarantino was under pressure from Robert De Niro himself to cast him in the main Max Cherry role, but he stuck to his guns, having already cast Robert Forster as Cherry, and De Niro remained to play Jackson's sidekick.
So what, you left her there?
I shot him.
Tarantino was absolutely right. De Niro brings way too much to the casting party. He wouldn't have worked as the straight lead. Having said which, there is an issue here. The Forster-Pam Grier relationship really lacks the chemistry to make it sparkle. With Jackie Brown, for the first time, Tarantino used alternative source material. The film is based on Elmore Leonard's Rum Punch, and again, I think this was a good decision that Tarantino would go back on afterwards. A great director doesn't always have to use his own stories to be a great auteur. Unfortunately, Jackie Brown, running at over 2.5 hours, ran too long for such an essentially pulp film. Get Shorty, another Elmore Leonard book turned film, was a huge success just 2 years earlier, and Get Shorty was shortier, running at a punchy 1 hour 45. I honestly believe if Tarantino had brought Jackie Brown inside 2 hours, he would have had a far better film on his hands, and a more successful one to boot. Unfortunately, I think Tarantino learned all the wrong lessons from the relative failure of his third feature, and not the single correct one, i.e. make your film shorter. Jackie Brown played it mostly straight, so Tarantino retreated back into the cartoonish style of Pulp Fiction. Did I say retreated? No, accelerated, and accelerated far beyond. Kill Bill would make Pulp Fiction look like a study in neo-realism. Rather than go shorty, Tarantino went capital B, bigly. He also fell back on his own storytelling, which is good but not genius. Tarantino is the master of writing great dialogue, even a wonderful scene, but rarely an entire great movie. Worst of all, rather than trying to surprise or unnerve his audience, Tarantino fell back into just giving us everything he thought we wanted. Which leads us to the two-dimensional cartoon pantomime of Kill Bill Volume 1. Did I say cartoon? It's a sad irony indeed that the deepest and most emotive, most effective part of Kill Bill is an actual cartoon. Volume 1 has its occasional, very occasional moments, but with a plot you could write on a postage stamp, it's a superficial, empty film. It reveals all those bad lessons he'd learned from Jackie Brown. Simplicity over complexity, surface over depth, style over substance, and caricature over character. The entire plot becomes an excuse for violence, which becomes a real issue for me with Tarantino's craft.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because
a little
it's so
of it?
much fun!
I have no problem with violence in movies, far from it. The violence that bubbles and threatens and even bursts out of his first three films, constantly shocking and surprising us, now that violence has become an end and not a means. Kill Bill doesn't reveal anything about violence, rather the story itself is contorted so the violence can be justified. Which means those men in the hospital near the film's start need to be ready to SA Uma Thurman so she can be justified in killing them, and we can all go whoopee. That's pretty much the entire arc of the film, making people behave in an obnoxious enough way to justify their killing. And so much killing, so much murder. With all the carnage, death just becomes meaningless, even, dare I say it, boring. Kill Bill 2 is actually a better film, better with its characters, better with its dialogue. I wonder, somewhere at the very back of my editor's brain, if both films between them might actually contain a single effective work. Unfortunately for the art of movie making, Kill Bill was seen as a relative return to form by moviegoers and some of our more stupid critics. Unfortunately, this is now the Tarantino that will make a paltry 5 films in 15 years, the first of which is Death Proof, part of his Grindhouse franchise, and indeed a grind to watch. What a truly awful film. Even Tarantino admits it.
Death Proof has got to be the worst movie I ever made.
The only consolation is, unlike everything else Tarantino will labour over in the future, the film comes in under 2 hours. And then, in 2009, to even less deserved critical acclaim, comes Inglourious Basterds. With what is becoming classic Tarantino, the film delivers a stunningly great first scene, a stylish but gratuitous centre, and a stunningly bad conclusion. Allow me to put this in the language of dreams, since cinema, like no other art form, follows so many of the language and patterns of our dreams. In our dreams, we are constantly dealing with our own wishes and desires, trying to attain things we want in our lives, but lack. But our dreams also deny us those wishes, just like life. Moreover, it's usually those dreams, the ones that most deny our wishes, those are the dreams that stay with us most powerfully after we awake. It's the same in art. Art offers us those things that we long for deep down, being a hero, getting the girl, finding the treasure, marrying the prince, whatever. But at the same time, art, and films in particular, constantly delay or complicate or even deny that gratification. We know if we just get everything we want, we won't be satisfied. Unless, of course, you're watching a Tarantino film. It's the very worst of those bad lessons he learned after Jackie Brown. Now, everything is gratified. Complexity and nuance can go hang. Now everything just becomes gratuitous. Hence, Nazism, one of the most tragic things to happen to mankind in the 20th century, becomes, with Inglourious Basterds, something to be solved by Tarantino. Yes, we still have those Tarantino skills, some great scenes and acting and dialogue and casting. Christoph Waltz, please take a bow.
Merci.
But all the horrors of the power of Nazism, so brilliantly set up in the film's opening scene, all that terror is betrayed by the fantasy of everything that happens after. The plot is horribly thin and woefully overblown. The entire cellar scene is unnecessary. Really, it's only there to provide a middle act for this flimsy excuse of a story. And the final act, the cinema screening, is truly vapid. Just look at that shoe-fitting scene. Spoiler alert here, although I have to say, I don't think there's much of a story to spoil, but just look at that scene where Waltz realises he has the spy because the shoe fits her foot. Mein Gott, if you are believing stories like this, yes, you're believing in actual fairy tales. It's a Cinderella fantasy, not a serious attempt at story making. Worse still, one of our usual Tarantino strengths is weak sauce on this bloated bag of fast food rubbish.
See these tears so blue.
David Bowie's Putting Out Fire, so well used in Cat People, is recycled for no discernible reason whatsoever. I can't help thinking Quentin's record collection has been picked clean. And the overblown, well, that just gets more and more overblown. It would have been perfectly fine to just have Waltz as the villain to kill at the end, but instead we have to have Goebbels as well. Oh, sorry, not just Goebbels, but Goering, and Bormann, and OMG Hitler himself. It's insanely fantastical plotting which understands and reveals nothing about the terrifying power and violence of Nazi fascism. Did I mention violence? Oh, in this film, violence isn't an issue of Nazism. Rather, it's the solution for it, as it has become in all of Tarantino's films. Worse still, violence is actually comic.
You! Damn it, Hirschberg. Donnie, bring the other one over here.
Again, I have no problem with Nazis being funny. The producers is funny.
Don't be stupid, be a smarty. Come and join the Nazi party.
My God, Lubitsch was funny back in 1942.
Heil Hitler! Heil myself.
Inglourious Basterds is anything but funny. Rather, for a film that claims any proximity to Nazism, it's morally repugnant. And the wish fulfillment is truly off the scale. Have a taste for revenge? Here's Kill Bill. Hate Nazis? I give you Inglourious Basterds. Wasn't the slave trade horrible? Don't worry, here comes Django Unchained. No problematics, just commit violence on the baddies and we can all go home happy. Tarantino doesn't play on our prejudices or assumptions, he plays on our ignorance of the real issues underlying vengeance and violence, or Nazi fascism, or racism and the slave trade. No need to worry about any of that with Tarantino's child's version of the world. Django Unchained duplicates the errors of Inglourious Basterds, turning problematic issues into caricature baddies that can be erased with the help of some violence. All that great casting and acting, those interesting characters, the zippy dialogue and some undoubtedly excellent scenes, everything just evaporates in the end under the gunfire and carnage yet again. And yet again, it's the same with his most recent film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Some great characters, acting, dialogue, even some great scenes, but ultimately... The Manson story backgrounding the film is truly horrific and fascinating. How people in a cult were manipulated by a madman consumed by racism and even Beatles lyrics into murdering people under their dear leader's direction. All whilst Manson himself did nothing. It was the 60s dream turned into the stuff of nightmares, truly horrific to comprehend. Unless you're in Tarantino's hands, where once again we just get to kill the baddies and go home happy. There's some quality to the filmmaking, but there's also a large dollop of pretentiousness. Those overlong shots of a Hollywood from the past, the lingering shots of cinemas and posters, they aren't there just to show off the sets and props, but they're there to tell us we're watching the work d'un auteur. Look, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is in no way a bad film. Much of it is entertaining and well made, but ultimately, as ever, it's overblown and unsatisfying. I've left out one film, the exception that proves the rule. The Hateful Eight is Tarantino's best film since Jackie Brown. Tight, well plotted, well scripted, well acted, well shot. This should be another Tarantino masterpiece. Only it ain't. Rather like its director, the film can't help but running its mouth off. It's got over halfway through before things start to fall apart. Not at the point where Tarantino's voiceover so rudely interrupts the action.
About 15 minutes has passed since we last left our characters.
The problems actually come a little earlier, and spoiler alert, I am going to reveal some of the story here, so jump ahead 1 minute if you don't want the story revealed. As I was saying, the problems actually come a bit earlier, when Samuel L. Jackson reveals, for no proper reason, that his Lincoln letter is a fake.
Was all that horseshit? Of course it was.
Which then leads to a totally unnecessary side story about Southern racists having to give Mr. Jackson a BJ. Necessary only so he can kill the racist Bruce Dern, whose presence and purpose is entirely unnecessary to the film in any case. The only reason any of this happens is to include this side story about revenge that I'm guessing Tarantino thought was cool, so he had to include it. Everything else in the story up to this point has been sharp, focused, concentrated, bottled up.
You're writing your life story. You bet I am.
But that's all lost as we take an extra trip in bright sunlight so the racists can get their violent comeuppance. The Hateful Eight could have been a great film until it has to indulge in Tarantino's desire for easy wish fulfillment and over-bloated violence. Now the film becomes too long, and yet again the end doesn't really work, and this is true of every one of Tarantino's films post Jackie Brown. The endings never work. And that's not because they're badly written. No, the problem with Tarantino's endings reveal the problems underpinning the whole movie. It's what happens when you try and build a great structure on wooden sticks. The whole thing always comes tumbling down in the end. The Hateful Eight could have been a smaller structure that stayed standing by the end. It could have been a Western Reservoir Dogs. It could even have been a masterpiece. If only Tarantino realised a good scene doesn't mean a good story. Indeed, sometimes what seems like a good scene can actually harm your story. If only he didn't always have to go big and let his fantasies run wild. If only he embraced nuance and complexity. If only he showed us the world as it is and not the world as we desire. It's such a shame. The man has so much real talent and ability. If Tarantino had kept on the trajectory of Jackie Brown, serious, character-based filmmaking using material he hadn't necessarily originated himself, making movies that belonged more in our real world rather than a childish fantasy. If so, then I think Tarantino may have become the great movie director he originally threatened to be. Please like and subscribe.